If someone had told me that the moment my marriage truly ended would happen in a hospital room just hours after I gave birth, I would have laughed. Not because my life was perfect, but because I believed the end of a marriage had to be loud. Arguments, raised voices, doors slammed shut. I did not expect it to arrive quietly. Wrapped in the smell of disinfectant, under soft fluorescent lights, with my newborn sleeping beside me in a clear plastic cot. I was exhausted, my body still shaking from labour, my mind foggy with painkillers and relief. And then my father spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not sound angry. He simply looked at me and asked, "Emily, was the £4,000 I sent you every month really not enough?" For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. £4,000 every month. I stared at him, then at the small bag of baby clothes at my feet. Clothes I had bought on sale, at a charity shop, because that was what I could afford. I felt my chest tighten. "Dad," I said slowly, "I have never received that money." The room went silent. My father did not move. But something in his eyes changed. A calm stillness, the kind that appears just before something breaks. And that was when the door opened. I heard laughter, carefree, almost cheerful. My husband walked in, followed by his mother, their hands full of shopping bags, expensive ones, the kind I had trained myself not to look at anymore. They froze when they saw my father, and in that single second, before anyone spoke, before anyone explained, before anyone lied, I understood something with terrifying clarity. The reason I had worked through my pregnancy, the reason I had been told there was no money for vitamins, the reason I had learned to survive on almost nothing. It was not because we were struggling. It was because someone had decided that my comfort, my dignity, and even my suffering were a fair price to pay for their lifestyle. If you want to know what happened next, how the truth came out, and how the people I trusted destroyed themselves with their own lies, comment the number 1 below and stay with me until the end. Before everything fell apart, my marriage looked ordinary. Not perfect, not dramatic, just normal. The kind of life people in England nod at politely when you describe it. A rented house in a quiet neighbourhood, a small garden we never quite had time to take care of. Evenings spent watching television, eating whatever was quick and affordable. My husband Jack was not a bad man. That was what made everything so confusing later. He worked in an office, left the house every morning at the same time, came home tired, loosened his tie, and talked about spreadsheets and deadlines. He did not drink. He did not shout. He never raised a hand. To the outside world, he was reliable, safe, the sort of man mothers like their daughters to marry. And for a long time, I believed that was enough. We did not argue much. When we disagreed, Jack preferred silence. He would say things like, "Let us not turn this into a problem," or "It will sort itself out." At first, I thought that meant he was calm, mature. Later, I realized it meant something else. Jack avoided conflict the way some people avoid pain, by stepping back, by letting someone else decide. That someone else was his mother. Margaret had never lived with us, but her presence filled every room. She called every day, sometimes twice. She knew what time Jack left for work, what time he usually ate, what he should and should not spend money on. Margaret never shouted either. She did not need to. Her control came wrapped in concern, in soft warnings, in sentences that sounded reasonable until you listened closely. "You should save, Emily. Money is tight for everyone these days. Jack works hard. We must not put pressure on him. She said these things with a gentle smile, as if she were protecting her son, and, by extension, me. I tried to be the understanding daughter-in-law, the kind who did not complain, the kind who did not make things uncomfortable. When Jack and I first talked about finances, we agreed on something simple. We would live within our means, no luxuries, no unnecessary risks. Jack earned a steady salary, not impressive, not terrible, enough to cover rent, bills, food and fuel. I worked as a freelance designer. Some months were good, some months were quiet. It balanced out, most of the time. On paper, we were fine. In reality, we were always one unexpected expense away from stress. If the boiler made a strange noise, we worried. If the car needed repairs, we delayed. If prices went up at the supermarket, we quietly bought less. Margaret called this being sensible. I called it careful. When I became pregnant, that carefulness turned into something heavier. Every purchase felt like a decision that needed permission, not just from Jack, but from his mother. If I mentioned buying better food, Jack would say, "I will talk to Mum." If I needed something for myself, he would hesitate, not because he disagreed, but because he did not want to upset her. "Mum worries," he would say. "You know how she is." And I did know. Margaret worried about money, about appearances, about control. What she never worried about was how tired I was. How often I felt guilty for wanting things that should have been normal. I told myself this was marriage, compromise, adjustment. People often say that marriage is about patience, about choosing your battles. So I chose silence instead. From the outside, we looked stable. Two adults doing their best. No chaos, no scandal. Inside, something was already off balance. I just did not know yet that what I thought was a quiet life was actually a carefully managed one, and that the comfort I kept sacrificing was not disappearing by accident. Pregnancy did not make my life louder. It made it smaller. My world slowly narrowed to appointments, deadlines, and quiet calculations in my head. How much was left? What could wait? What absolutely could not? I continued working as a freelance designer, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I felt I had no choice. Some mornings, I worked from the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold beside me. Other nights, I sat on the sofa with my laptop balanced on my knees, one hand on the keyboard, the other resting on my stomach, as if that could somehow comfort the baby. Clients did not care that I was pregnant. Invoices did not pause. Deadlines did not soften. And I did not ask them to. Jack would watch me work late and say, "You should rest." But he never said, "Let me help," or "We can manage without this." Rest, in his mind, was something I could choose. Money was not. As my body changed, my needs became simpler, not bigger. I did not want luxuries. I wanted decent food, prenatal vitamins, comfortable clothes that did not make me feel like I was borrowing someone else's body. The first time I asked Jack for money during my pregnancy, it was for vitamins. The doctor had recommended them after a routine checkup. Nothing special, nothing extravagant. Jack frowned slightly and said, "I will talk to Mum." That sentence followed me everywhere after that. I waited. A day, then 2. When I asked again, Jack avoided my eyes. "Mum thinks they are unnecessary," he said. "Women manage without all this before." I bought the vitamins myself, quietly, from my own savings. The second time, I asked about food. The nausea had been bad, and certain things were easier to keep down. Fresh fruit, soup, simple meals that cost a little more than pasta and bread. Margaret called that being fussy. "Pregnancy is not an illness," she said over the phone. "You cannot expect special treatment." Special treatment, that was her phrase. I learned to swallow my words before they reached my mouth, to apologize for wanting things, to explain myself too much. If I bought something small, Margaret noticed. If I did not, she commented anyway. "You are very careful with money, Emily." Sometimes she smiled when she said it, sometimes she did not. Careful slowly became another word, then another. Tight, difficult, independent in a way that made people uncomfortable. Once, after I mentioned I was tired, Margaret laughed softly and said, "You young women want everything your way. You do not know how to rely on a man." Jack did not correct her. He rarely did. He would squeeze my hand under the table, a small gesture, an apology without words. But apologies did not buy groceries, they did not pay for prescriptions, they did not make the nights shorter. I worked through my second trimester with my back aching and my feet swollen. I worked through my third with a constant dull pain that I learned to ignore. I told myself this was temporary, that once the baby arrived, things would ease. What I did not realize was that my silence was being misinterpreted. My independence was not seen as strength. It was seen as permission. Permission not to worry about me. Permission not to ask how I was coping. Permission to assume that if I did not complain, I must be fine. I began to hear myself described in ways I did not recognize. Emily likes to manage on her own. She does not need much. She is very particular. Those sentences followed me like labels. No one asked why I worked so much. No one asked why I never asked for help anymore. They only noticed that I stopped asking. If you have ever been pregnant and felt guilty for needing support, if you have ever been told you were too much for wanting too little, pause the video for a moment and comment the word yes below. I need to know I am not the only one who lived like this. My father arrived without warning. There was no dramatic announcement, no rush of noise or attention. He simply appeared in the doorway, as if he had always been meant to be there. At first, I did not recognize the weight of the moment. I was still drifting in and out of exhaustion, my thoughts slow and heavy. But the room reacted before I did. The nurse straightened. The quiet chatter outside seemed to fade. Even the air felt different. My father did not smile. He did not rush to my bedside. He stood still, taking everything in. The narrow hospital room, the worn chairs, the small plastic cot beside me. His eyes moved carefully, methodically, as if he were assessing a space, not visiting it. He nodded once to the nurse. "Thank you," he said. "That will be all." His voice was calm, low, controlled. When the nurse left, the silence that followed was not awkward. It was deliberate. My father finally looked at me. "You are tired," he said. It was not a question. I nodded. The effort alone made my head ache. He glanced at the baby. His expression softened for the briefest moment. Not enough to call it a smile, just a release of tension. "A boy," he said quietly. "Good." He stepped closer then, but not too close. He did not touch me. He did not touch the baby. Instead, he looked at the small details, the blanket, the bag of clothes, the items I had gathered one by one over months of careful choices. He did not comment on them, not yet. My father had never been a man of unnecessary words. Growing up, I learned that his silence often meant more than his speeches. If he spoke too much, it was usually to others. If he spoke very little, it was because he was thinking. I waited for questions. How was I feeling? Was I in pain? Did I need anything? He asked none of those. Instead, he said, "I came to see my grandson." There was no accusation in his tone, no warmth either, just a statement of purpose. He stood beside the cot, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. He looked down at the sleeping baby with the focus of a man studying something valuable. I watched him from the bed, suddenly aware of how small the room felt, how temporary everything around me seemed. My father had built his life on structure, on order, on knowing where things belonged, and nothing in that room matched the world he came from. Finally, he spoke again. "Emily," he said, "why are you here?" I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "This hospital," he continued. "This room." His gaze did not leave the cot. "Is this where you chose to give birth?" The question landed softly, but it carried weight. "Yes," I replied. "It is fine. It is clean. It is enough." Enough. He repeated the word silently to himself, as if testing it. He turned to face me fully for the first time. "You always did say that," he said. "Enough." There was something unfamiliar in his voice now, not anger, not disappointment. Concern, but not the gentle kind, the kind that comes when something does not add up. He looked at me carefully then, not just my face, but my posture, my hands, the way I held myself, as if taking up too much space was a risk. He said nothing for a long moment. In that silence, I felt exposed in a way I had not expected, as if the careful balance I had been maintaining for years had suddenly tilted. My father exhaled slowly. "I have been away," he said, "but not unaware." He paused, then added, "I will ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." My stomach tightened. He met my eyes. "Are you being looked after?" The question was simple, too simple, and somehow it was the most dangerous one anyone had asked me in years, because I realized in that moment that I did not know how to answer it without telling the truth. My father did not press me for an answer. He waited. That was always his way. When he waited, it meant he was watching, measuring, allowing the truth to surface on its own. I looked away first, not because I was hiding something, but because I was suddenly aware of how exposed I felt, lying there in a thin hospital gown, hair unwashed, body weak. I said nothing. My father glanced at his watch, then back at me. "You know," he said calmly, "I almost did not come today." My heart skipped. I did not know why. "I assumed everything was handled," he continued. "You are married. You have a home. You always said you were fine." Fine. The word landed heavily between us. He stepped closer to the bed, not aggressively, just enough to shorten the distance. "Emily," he said, "I want to ask you something very specific." I felt my stomach tighten. He did not raise his voice. He did not soften it either. "Have you been receiving the £4,000 I send you every month?" For a second, my mind went completely blank. £4,000. The number echoed in my head, sharp and unfamiliar, like a foreign language I was supposed to understand. Every month. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My father watched me closely, not impatient, not accusing, just attentive. "I have been sending it for 3 years, he added, "since shortly after your wedding." 3 years. My chest felt tight, as if the air in the room had thinned. "I send it on the 1st of every month," he continued. "Same account, same reference." He paused. "It is not a small amount." I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, loud, unavoidable. £4,000 a month. I thought of the nights I stayed awake working, the emails sent at midnight, the constant calculations, the way I hesitated before buying even the smallest things. None of it made sense. I tried to speak, but the words would not arrange themselves properly. My father noticed. He leaned back slightly, giving me space, or perhaps removing pressure. "When I did not hear from you," he said, "I assumed you did not need it." There it was again, that word, need. He looked around the room once more, the chairs, the walls, the thin curtains separating us from strangers. "Nothing here suggests excess," he said quietly. The silence stretched. It was not the kind of silence that feels empty. It was heavy, dense, filled with unspoken questions. My hands trembled slightly under the blanket. I pressed them together to steady myself. "I never wanted to rely on you," I said finally. The words came out softer than I intended. My father nodded once. "I know." He did not interrupt. He did not correct me. "But this was not reliance," he continued. "This was support." Support. The word settled somewhere deep in my chest. He took out his phone then, not dramatically, not to confront me, just a simple movement. "I keep records," he said, "of everything." He did not show me the screen. He did not need to. "I know exactly what I have sent, and when." My mouth felt dry. "If you are telling me you have not received it," he said slowly, "then something is very wrong." I felt a flicker of fear. Not panic, something colder. Because if the money existed and it was not with me, then it had to be somewhere else. And suddenly there were only two possibilities. Neither of them was safe. My father looked at me again, really looked. "I am not asking you to answer now," he said. "You have just given birth." He paused. "But I want you to think carefully." He met my eyes. "Where did the money go, Emily?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, waiting. And in that moment, I realized that whatever the truth was, once it came out, nothing in my life would remain the same. The door opened without urgency. No knock, no hesitation. I heard their voices before I saw them, light, carefree, almost cheerful. Jack stepped in first, still wearing his office coat, tie loosened, phone in his hand. Behind him came his mother. Margaret did not look like someone visiting a hospital. She looked like someone finishing a pleasant afternoon out. She carried two large shopping bags, thick paper, firm handles, logos printed so boldly they did not need explanation. Another bag followed, long, narrow, the kind that suggested something structured inside. A handbag, perhaps, new, untouched by everyday use. They stopped when they saw my father, not because he said anything, he did not, not because he moved, he barely did. They stopped because the atmosphere changed. Jack's smile faded first. Then his posture stiffened. He straightened his back, as if remembering who he was standing in front of. Margaret recovered more quickly. She always did. "Oh," she said lightly, "I did not realize you were here." She adjusted the bags in her hands, the paper rustling softly. A small sound, but somehow very loud. My father acknowledged her presence with a nod, nothing more. He did not greet her. He did not introduce himself. He simply watched. Jack cleared his throat. "Hi, Dad," he said, attempting warmth. "We thought we would bring some things." Things. He gestured vaguely towards the bags. No one asked what they were. No one needed to. Margaret stepped further into the room without invitation. She placed the bags carefully on the chair beside the bed. The chair creaked under the weight. "You must be exhausted, Emily," she said. Her voice was smooth, concerned, almost convincing. She reached out as if to touch my arm, then paused, as if remembering an audience. "Childbirth is such an ordeal," she continued. "One really deserves a treat afterwards." A treat. She smiled when she said it. My father's eyes moved slowly, from Margaret's face to the bags, to the polished shoes she was wearing, shoes I had never seen before, then to Jack. Jack avoided his gaze. I noticed something then, something small. Jack's car keys, hanging loosely from his fingers, a new key fob, sleek, black, unfamiliar. I had asked him about the car only a week earlier. He told me it was a company arrangement, temporary, nothing to worry about. Margaret followed my father's gaze without realizing it. She glanced down at her own shoes, then at the handbag leaning against the chair. Her hand tightened around the handle. No one spoke. The silence was no longer gentle. It pressed down on the room, demanding attention. My father finally spoke. "That is quite a lot to bring into a hospital room," he said. His tone was neutral, observational. Margaret laughed softly. "Oh, these," she said. "Just a few bits. We were nearby." Nearby. Jack shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I told Mum not to overdo it," he said quickly, trying to sound light, trying too hard. Margaret waved him off. "Nonsense," she said. "Quality matters, especially now." Quality. The word echoed unpleasantly. My father stepped closer to the chair. He did not touch the bags. He did not need to. He looked at the tags, the pristine edges, the careful way everything had been placed. Unused, unworn, new. "Interesting," he said quietly. Margaret tilted her head. "Is something wrong?" Her smile did not falter, but her eyes sharpened. My father did not answer her. He looked at Jack instead. "You have been busy," he said. Jack swallowed. "It is nothing," he replied. "Just timing." Timing. That was the word Jack used when he did not want to explain something. Margaret sensed the shift then. She straightened. "We are only trying to make things comfortable," she said. "There is no harm in that." Comfortable. The word hung between us. I looked at the bags again, at the polished leather, at the unfamiliar shine of new things. Then I looked at myself. The thin hospital blanket, the borrowed gown, the careful choices I had made for months. No accusation had been spoken, no confrontation had begun, and yet, in that moment, everything my father needed to know was sitting quietly in that room. If you are watching this, and you already see what I saw before anyone said a word, pause the video and comment the word "seen" below. Because sometimes the truth does not need to be explained, it just needs to be noticed. Margaret was the first to speak. She did not raise her voice. She did not look angry. If anything, she sounded disappointed. "Emily," she said gently, "this is not the time to cause drama." Drama. The word landed like a quiet accusation. She placed one hand on the back of the chair, steadying herself, as if she were the reasonable one in the room. "You have always been very particular," she continued, "about money, about how things should be done." She smiled then, the kind of smile that pretends to be kind. "You like to manage everything yourself. You always have." My father said nothing. Jack shifted beside her, eyes fixed on the floor. Margaret turned slightly towards my father, as if inviting him into a private understanding. "Emily does not like to ask for help," she said. "She prefers independence. It makes her feel in control." Control. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "So when you talk about money, it can sound confusing, because Emily often refuses support." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I never refuse support," I said quietly. Margaret tilted her head. "Did you not?" She kept her tone light. "Jack offered help many times. You always said you were fine." I looked at Jack. He did not look back. I asked for vitamins, I said. My doctor recommended them. Margaret sighed, a long, patient sigh. Vitamins, she repeated, as if pregnancy were an illness. She shook her head slowly. Women in my generation did not need all these extras. We were strong. Strong. The word felt sharp. And food, I added. I asked for better food. Margaret laughed softly. You are very sensitive, Emily, she said, always reading into things. She turned to my father again. I have tried to guide her, she said, to teach her balance, to help her understand that money does not grow on trees. My father remained silent. Jack swallowed. Mum only worries, he said finally. His voice was low, almost apologetic. Margaret took that as encouragement. Exactly, she said. I worry because I see how Emily spends. Little things add up. Little things. She glanced briefly at the shopping bags, then away again. Coffee here, a meal there, always something. I stared at her. I stopped buying coffee months ago, I said. I stopped buying almost everything. Margaret smiled, as if I had just proven her point. You see, she said, this is what I mean. She exaggerates. She makes herself sound deprived. Deprived. The word echoed in my head. My hands began to shake under the blanket. I worked through my pregnancy, I said. I paid for things myself. Jack shifted again. You did not have to do that, he murmured. I turned to him. Then why did I have to? I asked. Why did I work until midnight while you said there was no money? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Margaret stepped in smoothly. Jack works very hard, she said. You cannot expect him to carry everything. Carry everything. The irony was almost unbearable. You put pressure on him, she continued, without meaning to, by insisting on independence, by making him feel inadequate. I felt tears rise, not from sadness, but from sheer disbelief. I never wanted him to carry everything, I said. I just wanted basic support. Margaret frowned slightly, as if disappointed. You see, she said to my father, this is what I mean. Emily always wants more. She does not realize how demanding she sounds. Demanding. The word felt like a slap. Jack said nothing. He stood there, hands clasped together, avoiding every pair of eyes in the room. His silence was louder than any accusation. My father finally moved. Not much, just enough to be noticed. Margaret, he said quietly. She turned to him, still smiling. You are telling me, he continued, that my daughter chose to suffer. The room froze. Margaret hesitated, just for a second. I am saying, she replied carefully, that Emily has always been difficult to help. Difficult. Jack flinched. My father looked at him. Is that true? He asked. Jack did not answer immediately. He rubbed his hands together, cleared his throat. I did not want to upset anyone, he said at last. That was it. Not a denial, not a defense, just an excuse. Something inside me went cold. In that moment, I understood something I had avoided for years. The problem was not that they did not see my pain. The problem was that they found a way to explain it away. If you are listening to this and you feel angry right now, comment the word angry below, because I know I was not the only one who felt their reality being rewritten right in front of them. My father did not react the way Margaret expected. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not defend me with emotion. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Slowly, deliberately, he took out his phone. That single movement changed everything. I do not deal in assumptions, he said quietly. I deal in records. Margaret laughed once, a short, dismissive sound. Are we really doing this now? She asked. In a hospital? My father did not look at her. I send money the same way every month, he continued. Automatically, documented. He tapped the screen, once, then again. I keep copies, he said. For reasons exactly like this. Jack shifted uneasily. Mum, he murmured, maybe we should talk later. Later. My father looked up. There is no later, he said. Only facts. He turned the screen slightly towards me, not fully, just enough. I saw numbers, dates, a familiar reference line. £4,000, first of the month, every month. My breath caught. Since 3 weeks after your wedding, he said, I never missed a payment. Margaret's smile tightened. That proves nothing, she said quickly. You sent it. That does not mean she needed it. My father nodded once. Agreed. He scrolled. Now we move to the next part. The screen changed. Another list. Another account. Jack went very still. This is where the money went, my father said, after it left my account. He paused, not for effect, but to let the words settle. Into an account in your household. Margaret frowned. That could be anything, she said. Shared expenses, bills. My father tapped again. Then the spending would reflect that. He read aloud, not loudly, but clearly. Car dealership, deposit, £8,600. Jack's face drained of colour. Margaret inhaled sharply. That is not relevant, she said. Transportation is necessary. My father nodded again. Agreed. Another scroll. Luxury retailer, £2,100. Margaret's fingers tightened around the chair. Home improvement store, large order, paid in full. I remembered the new kitchen tiles, the ones Margaret had proudly shown me, calling them an investment. My father did not stop. Weekend hotel booking, 2 nights, city centre. Jack swallowed hard. You said that was a work conference, I whispered. He did not answer. The silence thickened. My father continued, his voice steady, unmoved by the shift in the room. None of these transactions align with groceries, utilities, medical expenses. He looked at Margaret for the first time, or prenatal care. Margaret straightened. Emily never asked for that, she snapped. You heard her yourself. She likes to manage alone. My father did not respond immediately. He scrolled again. This is the vehicle, he said. Registered 2 months ago. He turned the screen slightly, just enough. The license plate, the model, the date. Jack's keys suddenly felt very loud in the room. And this, my father added, is the insurance, paid annually, in full. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it. My father locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. I did not come here to shame anyone, he said. I came to understand. He looked at Jack. You told my daughter there was no money. Jack's shoulders sagged. You let her work through her pregnancy. Jack looked at the floor. You let her believe she was a burden. Jack said nothing. Margaret tried one last time. You cannot prove intent, she said. Money moves, things happen. My father turned to her calmly. I am not proving intent, he replied. I am proving patterns. He looked around the room. Patterns do not lie. I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not anger. Clarity. The pieces I had been holding separately were suddenly one picture. My father met my eyes. "This is not about punishment," he said. "It is about truth." Jack finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "I did not think it would matter," he said. "I was going to fix it." Fix it. I closed my eyes. If you are listening to this and you feel your stomach drop because you have seen this pattern before, pause the video and comment the word proof below. Because sometimes the truth does not arrive all at once. It arrives line by line. After the numbers, no one spoke. Not immediately. The room felt smaller than before, as if the walls had edged closer, quietly, without anyone noticing. My father did not continue. He had already said enough. Margaret stared at the floor, not defeated, calculating. Jack stood frozen, the keys still in his hand. His shoulders slightly rounded now, as if the weight had finally reached him. I listened to my own breathing, shallow, uneven. For a moment I thought I might cry. I did not. Something else was happening, something colder. I turned my head slowly and looked at Jack. He flinched, just a fraction, but I saw it. "Jack," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady, almost calm. He looked up, not fully. His eyes stopped somewhere near my shoulder. "I want to ask you one thing," I said. Margaret shifted. "Emily, this is not the moment," she said quickly. My father raised one hand, not high, just enough. Margaret stopped. The silence returned, thicker than before. I kept my eyes on Jack. "You knew," I said. Not accusing, not emotional, just a statement. "You knew my father was sending money." Jack swallowed. He did not answer. I waited. Not because I needed drama, but because I needed clarity. "You knew," I repeated, "didn't you?" He closed his eyes briefly, as if that might delay the moment. My chest tightened. "Jack," I said again, "just tell me this." My voice softened, almost gentle. "Did you know?" The question did not echo, it did not demand, it cut. Jack opened his eyes. He nodded. Once. Small, barely visible, but unmistakable. That was all. No explanation, no defense, no story, just a nod. Something inside me broke, not loudly, not violently. It cracked, cleanly. I felt it travel through my body, like a line being drawn. Everything before that moment, and everything after. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply understood. All the nights I worked late, all the times I apologized for asking, all the moments I felt guilty for needing support. They were not misunderstandings. They were choices. I looked away from Jack then, not because I could not bear to see him, but because I no longer needed to. Margaret began to speak. "It is not as simple as that," she said. "You are emotional. You have just given birth." I did not look at her. I looked at my father. He was watching me, not with pity, not with anger, with respect, as if he had been waiting for me to reach this point myself. I exhaled slowly. In that breath, something shifted. I was still hurt, still tired, still sitting in a hospital bed. But I was no longer confused. Confusion had been their greatest protection, and it was gone. I looked back at Jack one last time. "Thank you," I said. He frowned. "What for?" "For telling me the truth," I replied, without saying a word. He opened his mouth. I turned away. There was nothing left to hear. If you were listening to this and you felt that moment in your chest when the truth finally clicked, do something unexpected. Do not comment a sentence. Just comment a single dot below. Because sometimes the loudest realizations arrive in silence. The decision did not arrive with drama. There was no speech, no ultimatum, no shaking hands. It arrived quietly, like something that had been waiting for me to finally be ready. I adjusted the blanket around myself and looked at my father. "I am leaving," I said. The words did not tremble. They did not rush. They settled. Jack looked up sharply. "Emily," he said, "let's not do this now." Not now, as if timing had ever protected me before. I did not look at him. "I am not doing anything," I replied. "I am deciding." Margaret inhaled as if preparing to speak. My father lifted his hand slightly. She stopped. I shifted my weight carefully and reached for the small bag at the side of the bed, the one I had packed myself, quietly, weeks ago. I had not known when, but I had known. Jack watched me, confused now, fear flickering behind his eyes. "Where will you go?" he asked. I paused, not because I was unsure, but because the answer mattered. "I will go where I am safe," I said. No accusation, no explanation, just a fact. Margaret laughed softly. "You are overreacting," she said. "This is exhaustion, hormones." I finally looked at her. "No," I said. "This is clarity." She opened her mouth. I continued. "I will not argue. I will not explain myself, and I will not ask for permission." Jack stepped forward. "Emily, please," he said. "We can talk." Talk. The word felt distant. "We have talked for years," I replied, "just not honestly." I stood slowly, every movement deliberate, grounded. My father moved closer, not to help, but to stand with me. Jack noticed. Something in his expression shifted. "You are choosing sides," he said quietly. I looked at him then. "I am choosing myself," I replied. That seemed to hurt him more than anger ever could. Margaret straightened. "You cannot just leave with the baby," she said. "This is not how families behave." Families. I thought of the nights alone, the explanations, the silence. "This is exactly how families behave," I said, "when someone finally stops disappearing." The room felt different now, lighter, as if something heavy had been set down. I picked up my bag. Jack said nothing, not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew words would not reach me anymore. My father opened the door. The corridor outside was quiet, ordinary, bright. I took one last look at the room, at the bed, the chair, the place where confusion had ended. "I will arrange contact through solicitors," I said, "when I am ready." Jack nodded slowly, not in agreement, in recognition. I walked out, not fast, not slow, just forward. And for the first time in years, every step felt like it belonged to me. Power did not return to me all at once. It arrived in stages, quiet, procedural, unemotional. 3 days after I left the hospital, my father's solicitor called, not to ask how I was feeling, not to discuss apologies, to explain options. I sat at the kitchen table of my childhood home, my son sleeping in a borrowed cot nearby, and listened, carefully. "The priority is safety," the solicitor said, "physical and financial." There was no judgment in his voice, just clarity. He explained the process slowly, interim arrangements, documentation, evidence. The word evidence felt different now, not threatening, protective. Jack did not contact me directly, neither did Margaret. That was not kindness, it was instruction. A formal letter arrived first, then another. Clear language, measured tone. An application for restricted access, temporary, pending review. Not punishment, protection. I read the words twice. Jack was not banned from his child, he was limited. Supervised contact only, scheduled, recorded. Margaret's name appeared once, then again. No unsupervised involvement, no decision-making authority, no access to financial records. I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph, relief. The solicitor continued. Given the financial diversion, there will also be an injunction. An injunction. The word sounded heavier than it was. No movement of funds, no asset transfers, no disposal of property without written consent. Margaret's shopping bags came back to me then. The car, the renovations, all frozen. I signed where instructed. No shaking hands, no tears, just ink. Jack finally asked to speak to me, through his solicitor. I declined, not out of anger, out of clarity. Everything he needed to say could be said on paper. Margaret attempted a message, indirect, concerned, confused. My father returned it unopened. That was the real shift. Not shouting, not revenge. Boundaries that worked even when I was not in the room. Weeks passed. The noise faded. What remained was structure, routine, support, sleep. I learned that justice does not always arrive with raised voices or public scenes. Sometimes it arrives as silence, as distance, as rules that hold. One afternoon, I received a final update. The court has approved the interim orders, the solicitor said. Nothing changes until review. I thanked him and meant it. That night, I stood by the window, holding my son, and felt something I had not felt in years. Steady. If you are listening to this, and you have ever wondered whether quiet justice still counts, do something simple. Do not comment a story. Do not explain. Just comment the word "done" below, because sometimes the strongest victories make very little noise. Karma did not arrive with noise. There were no headlines, no dramatic confrontations, no public downfall. It arrived quietly, in ways most people did not notice. Jack lost his job 3 months later. Not suddenly, not with scandal. The company restructured, budgets tightened, roles were reviewed. Jack's position was deemed unnecessary. That was the word they used, unnecessary. He told people it was bad luck, timing, the economy. He did not mention the legal letters, or the stress, or the way his focus had slipped long before the review meetings began. Margaret blamed everyone else. The company, the courts, me. She told friends that families were being torn apart by modern ideas, that loyalty no longer mattered, that sons were punished for their wives' emotions. Her voice was still confident, but fewer people listened. Without Jack's income, things became smaller. The new car went first, sold quietly, no replacement. Then the holidays stopped. The restaurant dinners disappeared. The kitchen renovations remained unfinished, tiles stacked in boxes, waiting. Margaret complained about the inconvenience, about how unfair it all was, but she never mentioned the money that used to arrive every month, the money she had grown used to, the money she assumed would never stop. Jack applied for work, interviews, rejections, polite emails that ended with "best of luck." His confidence faded, not all at once, but steadily. He began avoiding people he used to impress, old colleagues, friends who asked simple questions. "What are you doing now?" Margaret answered for him when she could. "He is taking time," she said. "Reassessing." Reassessing. The word sounded better than unemployed. I heard all of this second-hand, through mutual contacts, through silence where noise used to be. I did not celebrate. I did not comment. Because what I saw was not justice as punishment, it was consequence. Jack had relied on stability he did not protect, on money he did not earn, on trust he did not respect. When those things were removed, there was nothing underneath. Margaret aged quickly, not physically, but emotionally. Her authority no longer worked. Her opinions carried less weight. Her certainty no longer controlled outcomes. She was not crueler, just smaller. I did not take pleasure in it, because by then I was somewhere else, building routines, raising my son, learning what calm felt like. Karma did not give me anything back. It did not restore years or erase memories. It simply rearranged the truth. Jack lived with the results of his choices. Margaret lived with the limits of hers. And I lived without them. That was enough. If you are listening to this and you expected revenge but found something quieter instead, stay with me, because the story does not end with their fall. It ends with what comes after. Rebuilding did not feel heroic. There were no big announcements, no sudden confidence, no moment where everything clicked into place. It felt ordinary. Some days it felt boring, other days exhausting. I started with what I could control. Mornings, feeding my son, washing bottles, folding clothes while listening to the radio quietly in the background. Routine was not glamorous, but it was grounding. For the first time in years, my energy was not spent managing someone else's emotions or explaining my existence. It was spent on us. When my son slept, I studied. Nothing ambitious at first, short online courses, updated software, refreshing skills I already had but had never been allowed to prioritize. I did not tell many people, not because I was ashamed, but because I did not need witnesses anymore. I worked from the dining table, sometimes from the sofa, sometimes with one ear open, listening for a cry. Progress was slow, and that was fine. I took small freelance projects, carefully, only what I could handle. The first invoice I sent under my own name felt heavier than the money it brought in. It meant independence, real independence, not the kind that is forced, but the kind that is chosen. There were setbacks, weeks where nothing came through, emails unanswered, applications ignored. On those days, I reminded myself that stability is built, not granted. I did not rush. I did not borrow optimism from motivational quotes. I trusted consistency instead. My father watched quietly. He did not interfere. He did not advise unless I asked. One afternoon he said, "You are doing this properly." It was not praise, it was recognition. As months passed, my work became steadier, not lucrative, just reliable. Enough to plan, enough to breathe. I moved into a small flat, nothing impressive, but it was ours. White walls, second-hand furniture, a sense of ownership I had never felt before. I enrolled my son in nursery part-time. The first morning I left him there, my hands shook. But when I returned and saw him playing calmly, I realized something important. Letting go is also a skill. I did not rebuild myself to prove anything. Not to Jack, not to Margaret, not to the world. I rebuilt because I wanted a life that did not require shrinking. There was no sudden glow-up, no dramatic transformation, just quiet confidence, growing slowly, like muscle. I learned how to say no, without explanation, without guilt. I learned that being tired does not mean being weak, and asking for help does not mean losing control. Most importantly, I learned that peace is not empty, it is full, of time, of space, of choices. One evening, as I closed my laptop and turned off the lights, I realized I was not waiting anymore. Not for approval, not for validation, not for the past to apologize. I was already living. And that was the rebuild. If you are listening to this and you are somewhere in the middle, not broken, not healed, just rebuilding, stay with me. Because the last part is not about what I lost, it is about what I chose. The year ended quietly. No milestones announced, no victory marked. Just a birthday, my son's first. I did not plan a party. There were no banners, no crowded room full of expectations. I baked a small cake in the morning, simple, soft sponge, a single candle. The light in the kitchen was pale, winter light, the kind that comes in gently and asks for nothing. My son sat on the floor, hands clumsy, eyes curious, trying to understand the flame. I held him close, feeling the steady weight of him against my chest. That was when I noticed how calm the room felt, not empty, complete. I thought of all the birthdays I had spent trying to make things look right, trying to keep everyone comfortable, trying to disappear just enough. This one did not need that. I lit the candle. The flame flickered, caught, held. My son laughed, a short, surprised sound, as if the light had spoken directly to him. I did not make a wish. I did not close my eyes. I watched. Later that afternoon, we walked to the park. Nothing special, just coats, scarves, cold air. A woman sat on the bench near the gate, rocking a pram with one foot, looking tired in the way that feels familiar. Our eyes met. She smiled, not politely, honestly. I sat beside her. We did not exchange stories. We did not explain ourselves. We watched our children. When she stood to leave, she hesitated. "It gets easier," I said, not confidently, just gently. She nodded, as if storing the words somewhere for later. When I got home, I opened the window. The evening light was fading, turning the edges of things softer. I put my son to bed, read the same book twice, sang the same song quietly, off-key, unimportant. When the room went still, I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. I realized something then. I did not keep the marriage. I did not keep the house. I did not keep the version of myself that worked so hard to be acceptable. What I kept was simpler. I kept my mornings. I kept my breath. I kept my son's laughter echoing in a small kitchen. I kept the ability to sit beside someone else's tiredness without trying to fix it. I kept the light. Not the kind that blinds, the kind that stays. If you are listening to this, I will not tell you what to do next. I will leave you with an image instead. A room, a window, a candle just blown out, smoke curling slowly into the air, and a quiet certainty that what remains is enough. I did not tell this story to teach a lesson. I am not here to tell you what choices to make, or how strong you should be, or how quickly you should leave. Life is rarely that neat. Some people leave, some people stay. Some people stay longer than they should because they are still trying to understand what is happening to them. I know that feeling. For a long time, I thought clarity would arrive like a revelation, a moment of certainty, a dramatic turning point. But it did not. It arrived quietly, in small recognitions, in questions I could no longer ignore, in the realization that peace should not feel like a reward for enduring pain. If you're listening to this and parts of it felt familiar, that does not mean your story must look like mine. It only means you're paying attention. Sometimes the most important shift is not what you do next, but what you finally see clearly. I often wonder how many people are living in the space just before that clarity, not broken, not healed, just paused, watching, waiting, trying to decide whether the feeling in their chest is fear or truth. So I will leave you with a question, not a conclusion. When was the first moment you realized something in your life was no longer right for you, even if you did not act on it yet? You do not have to explain. You do not have to give details. If you feel like it, share that moment in the comments, or simply acknowledge that it existed. And if you are not ready to do that, that is fine too. Some stories take time to surface. If you would like to hear more stories like this, told slowly, honestly, without noise, you know where to find me. I will be here.